Dax is one of the oldest, smartest, and most fascinating characters in all of Trek. As a joined Trill, the Dax symbiont passed from host to host, retaining the memories of 9 different lifetimes. Each host brought something new to the collective personality, for better or for worse. Dax has an incredibly well-developed backstory spanning most of Trek history. They've worked many jobs, learned countless skills, and travelled all across the quadrant. But the symbiont has also been through a lot of dark times and narrowly avoided death on more than a few occasions. For this list, we're going to look back at Dax's life from Leela to Ezri. Along the way, we'll also learn about how the character evolved behind the scenes and the massive impact they have had on Star Trek as well as the world in general. I'm Ellie for TrekCulture, here with 10 things you didn't know about Dax. Number 10. Dax's original makeup. As you probably know, the Trill looked very different when they first appeared in The Next Generation. They had prominent forehead ridges as opposed to Jadzia's iconic spots. However, the makeup crew for DS9 originally planned for a much more canon-friendly look for Jadzia. We got to have a look at early test shots of Jadzia with forehead makeup in the special features for the Season 2 DVD. After weeks of experimentation, the crew struggled to settle on a final look for the character, and Terry Farrell explained that the markings would keep reducing with each test, until eventually it just looked like she got hit in the forehead. Eventually, the Paramount executives made the final decision to remove her forehead markings, then went through several variations of spots before deciding on the final look. No explanation was ever given in canon for why the Trill in Next Gen looked so different, but Terry Farrell theorised that spotted Trills were from the north of their planet and the ones with forehead ridges were from the south. This actually became the explanation for the 2 different Romulan appearances in Trek, so it may very well be true, but you'd still have to acknowledge the design change of the symbionts somehow. Number 9. The symbiont's life before joining. You may get the impression that Trill symbionts spend their whole lives joined with humanoid Trills, but it's actually more complicated than that. The Dax symbiont was born in 2018 and lived for 150 years before finally being joined with their first host, Leela, in 2168, shortly after the time period of Star Trek Enterprise. Not much is known about these early years of the symbiont's life. We know that unjoined symbionts are bred in pools on the Trill homeworld, where they reside under the protection of the Trill Guardians until being joined. The symbionts could communicate with each other using electrical pulses in these pools, so it's likely the first century and a half of Dax's life was spent learning all they could from fellow symbionts before transitioning to life as a humanoid. Trill symbionts can usually live for several centuries, so for them, their first 150 years are like their childhood. Number 8. Why Terry Farrell chose to leave the show. When her original contract with Paramount ended in 1998, Terry Farrell made the decision not to renew it. She left the cast of DS9 and joined the sitcom Becca. Farrell wasn't happy to leave the show and she didn't want Jadzia to be killed off, nor did anyone else. In the 50-year mission, The Next 25 Years, Farrell explained that Rick Berman's alleged comments behind the scenes were a large factor in her decision to leave the show. She claimed that he regularly made misogynistic remarks about her appearance, refused any changes for her new contract, and even sent another producer to tell her, "If you weren't here, you know you'd be working at Kmart." Ooh, ow. Terry Farrell bravely stood up to this disrespect by deciding that she would leave the show unless they would allow her to appear in fewer episodes as a recurring character, rather than a member of the main cast. Farrell really cared about Jadzia, and nobody wanted the character to be killed. But again, allegedly, Rick Berman and/or the studio were unwilling to make these changes, or to capitulate at all. So Deep Space Nine lost one of its most beloved characters. Thankfully, Farrell continued to have a successful career, proving that she didn't need to let herself get bullied to be successful. After Jadzia's death in the show, Nicole DeBoer went on to play a new incarnation of the Dax character Ezri in the 7th season. DeBoer, who was unaware of Farrell's reason for leaving, performed the role wonderfully, though the circumstances behind Farrell's departure unfortunately highlighted systemic issues in the entertainment industry that are still being dealt with today. Number 7. Past relationships. Jadzia's marriage to Worf in 2374 was that host's first wedding, but the symbiont had actually already been married 5 other times with different hosts, 3 times as a bride and 2 as a groom. In fact, Dax parented 9 children previously. Trill Society actually has a law against reassociation between joined Trills and loved ones they knew in previous lives, primarily to allow each host to have completely new experiences. For this reason, Jadzia was likely forbidden from seeing her children, just as she was forbidden from continuing her relationship with Nalani Khan, the widow of Turias Dax. The exact rules against reassociation are slightly vague, but if found guilty, the punishment would be total banishment from Trill Society, which would prevent their symbiont from ever joining to a new host. Generally, Trills disapprove of reassociation in all forms, but Jadzia and Ezri were allowed to freely work with Sisko despite being his best friend previously as Curzon, so it's likely that only immediate family or partners are banned from reassociation. Number 6. Dax's unofficial hosts. Aside from the 9 primary hosts, the Dax symbiont was also briefly transferred to the Trill Varad in the episode Invasive Procedures. Varad dedicated his life to the goal of becoming joined with a symbiont. He was absolutely devastated when he was denied for symbiosis. Trying to escape a life of mediocrity, Varad and some accomplices invaded the station and forced Bashir to transfer Dax from Jadzia's body to his own. Eventually, the crew was able to return the symbiont to Jadzia, but she was left with permanent memories from Varad. Strangely, the Varad personality didn't resurface during Dax's Shintara in Facets, so it's possible that their brief joining didn't affect the symbiont as profoundly as the other more permanent hosts. Additionally, we saw another Dax host named Yedrin in the alternate future from Children of Time. This host was, however, removed from history when the crew of the Defiant prevented the ship from crashing on the planet Gaia, causing the timeline to change. Number 5. Inherited traits. Every host of the Dax symbiont can be seen as a new individual, a combination of the newest hosts and all those who came before. Still, each of their past lives had a small influence on their personality. For example, Leela would always walk with her arms behind her back, a habit that later hosts maintained. Sisko was particularly surprised by how similar Jadzia was to his old friend Curzon, the previous host. Jadzia maintained his love for Klingon culture and gambling, as well as his friendship with Sisko. Some traits would not be passed on to new hosts. For example, Tobin Dax bit his nails frequently, but no other host did. It's largely unpredictable which habits will be kept. Unfortunately, unwanted personality traits could also be passed on, like the host Joran's murderous tendencies. But the most extreme of these traits could be suppressed with practice. Number 4. Mony and McCoy. When the Defiant crew travelled to the original series time period in Trials and Tribulations, none were as excited as Dax, who had personal experience living in the mid-23rd century from her time as Mony Dax, the third host of the symbiont. Dax was very nostalgic for this era, from the clothes to the tricorder designs. At the time, Mony Dax was a professional gymnast. In the 2240s, she judged a gymnastics competition on Earth at the University of Mississippi, and it was here that she happened to meet a young Leonard McCoy, who was attending the university at the time. Apparently, the two got up to a bit more than gymnastics, as Jadzia remarked that she always had a feeling he'd become a doctor because he had the hands of a surgeon. It was a hilarious moment and connected Deep Space Nine to the original series wonderfully, just like the rest of this episode. Number 3. Dax's importance to the queer community. Dax's character has always resonated strongly with members of the queer community. The iconic episode Rejoined included a kiss between Jadzia and the wife of her former host, one of the first televised kisses between two women. The episode also showed a lesbian love story in a way that wasn't sensationalized, sexualized, or treated as odd in any way. Their love was forbidden, not because they were gay, but because of Trill laws regarding reassociation. This allowed the story to tell an allegory of gay oppression inside a world that was beyond homophobia. Many trans people also see themselves in Dax. Dax was friends with Sisko when they were living as a man, but later became Jadzia. The two remained very close friends, but their relationship was changed in subtle ways. This is very similar to many trans people's experiences when coming out to friends. Sisko even had to adjust to using new pronouns and a new name for her. Likewise, Dax adjusted to her own new identity as well. Years after Deep Space Nine at Star Trek Las Vegas 2019, Terry Farrell confirmed that she imagined Jadzia as pansexual, something we all assumed to begin with. The character canonically loved both men and women after all. Jadzia and then later Ezri made so many queer people feel represented at a time where good representation was much harder to find. Number 2. Ezri and Nicole DeBoer. In many ways, Nicole DeBoer's experience of joining the show was much like her character Ezri's experience of arriving on the station. Although Ezri reminded the Deep Space Nine crew of their lost friend, their love for Jadzia made it easier and quicker for them to grow attached to the new Dax. In an interview with Heavy, DeBoer explained that the same was true for herself. She reminded her castmates of Terry Farrell, but in a way that made them very welcoming to her. She even drew on this connection to Ezri while performing. She also mentioned how she could relate to Ezri's struggle to find her own identity after being joined, explaining that while she didn't get a worm put in her belly, she, like many others, had a long journey of self-discovery while growing up. DeBoer's natural connection to the character really helped her bring Ezri to life and to create a whole new personality for Dax. Number 1. Captain Dax. The Star Trek Enterprise episode Azati Prime marked the only time we've seen the Enterprise J on screen. Captain Archer was taken to the 26th century by Daniels and witnessed the Battle of Procyon 5, an important confrontation between the Federation and the Sphere Builders. In this episode, we only got to see a small part of the interior and a display of the ship's exterior on a screen, but Beta Canon expanded on this story quite a lot. In Star Trek Online, your character can travel to the 26th century to assist the Enterprise J in the Battle of Procyon 5. During the mission, you learn that the captain of this Enterprise is a Dax. We don't get to know much about them, but this would be such a cool future for the character, if true. We don't know exactly how long Trill symbionts live, but Dax could very well be alive in the 26th century. Their years of first-hand experience from the earliest years of the Federation would make them an incredible captain of the flagship. And there you have it, 10 things you didn't know about Dax. If there's something we missed, then please do let us know in the comments down below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie for TrekCulture. I hope you have a wonderful day, and remember to boldly go where no one has gone before.